You own a small business, and it ain't easy, and it may be going okay. Or you could be stuck and barely making ends meet. It's about time for a pivot. Welcome to Small Business Pivots. It's time for you to generate some cash, some real cash. How does $1 million sound? Only 9% of small businesses earn over $1 million annually. But your host is a business coach and an entrepreneur. And we're going to talk to the small business owners who've done the $1 million and more. It's time to be inspired. Welcome to the 7-Figure Club. This is Small Business Pivots. And now your host, Michael Morrison.
All right, so welcome to the show. Today we have a very special guest with a very special question I have for you. If you were to describe your life today in one word or a tweet, if you'd like, what does that look like?
That's such a good question. I would say upswing. I feel like I'm on the upswing.
Upswing? What do you mean, upswing?
Well, in life and in business, you have the roller coaster, and I feel right now I'm really starting to hit my stride in business and in life. And yeah, this is the first probably year that I have felt really good with my business. And of course, that bleeds into your life.
Excellent. So we all know as small business owners, it hasn't always been an upswing at the top of your game. So share with us a little bit about your upbringing, see if we can relate to some of the trials and tribulations that you came across, and then maybe up to your college, maybe some pivots along the way that kind of maybe messed with your mindset a little bit that we had to overcome in our adult life. So what does all that look like?
Oh, goodness. Well, I would say that it wasn't a ladder situation. That's how people make it appear when you're growing up, is that your career and your trajectory is this ladder. And for me, it's like more like a screw. There's like this rotation and the turning, and that, takes me up eventually. But I would say for my childhood, I was definitely like the weird kid. I was the awkward one. I grew up out in the country. And so I have a self-employed father, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And, we were very poor growing up, but it was one of those things I wasn't aware of it until people started pointing it out, like more in middle school, that I didn't have the name brand clothes, but we were really happy. I had a lot of space. So I spent a lot of time by myself. And I think one thing that might have been different is that I was really curious, and I got bored easy. And I was always, I spent a lot of time in my own head because I was by myself, out in the country with a dirt bike.
So you rode dirt bikes?
Yeah, I talked my dad into getting me like a little dirt bike when I was probably in 4th grade. So I had to have been about 8 or 9, and it was small, and he had it mechanically adjusted to where it really couldn't go fast enough to hurt you for sure. But so I think I put like 200,000 miles on that little dirt bike, and I have scars like on the inside of my leg to prove it from tumbling over all the time. But I would spend a lot of time in my own head just thinking through things. And so, yeah, I think that I developed quite a bit of curiosity, and my parents were very free range. They were never bent towards perfection. And so it was always like in school, like, do your best. And I was actually a pretty poor student. The highest I ever got on my ACT was a 19. I took it, I think, twice. And
that's triple mine. I can relate to that. I can definitely relate to that.
You're just flattering me at this point. My mom had put me a year ahead in school. I was on that cusp. I was August baby. So it was like everybody was saying, hold her back. But my mom, I think she might have wanted me out of the house because I was high strung. But what happened was I started failing at school when I hit about 4th grade because I just didn't have the maturity to sit and learn whatever concept they were teaching. And so I got it in my head that I was stupid because my grades started sinking. And so that was very like prominent in my childhood. I just thought something like I just thought I wasn't smart. And what they ended up doing is holding me back. And then, of course, the grades started improving. But in my psyche, I was still, you know, the dumb girl.
Mm-hmm.
And that I noticed pushed me through, college and my adult life and career of trying to prove to myself that I wasn't stupid. And what I learned was it didn't really matter the accomplishment that I would have. It was never enough. And so it wasn't really until I became older that I had to like sort through that mentality, because it doesn't matter how much money you make, what degree you get, what job you get. If it's broke in your head and you don't fix it, then the external things won't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, school wasn't easy. I was probably teased a lot just because, we didn't have a lot of money at that time. And then high school hit, and I started kind of coming into my own a bit. And so I but at the same time, I didn't really want anything to do with school because that felt like a negative place for me socially, academically. My grades, I was like a ABC student, but I was never like the type of person that could just walk in and take a test.
Mm.
So what I did figure out is that I did have to hustle, and I did learn that if it was something that I wanted, I could figure it out. And so that became my superpower to, finish out school, do well in college, and probably in business, is that I think from a young age, I accepted that I wasn't the smartest, didn't have the most money, but that wasn't going to be what got me through it. Like I knew that I could have these internal conversations and monologue with myself of like, Amy, you got this. Like, just sit and think through it. You can do this. And I think a lot of that came from my parents. They were just like, yeah, whatever you want to do, like, I believe that you're smart enough to do it. And I look back and I really appreciate that they didn't give me a hard time over, poor grades. They would give me a hard time if they felt I was being lazy and if I was, putting half effort into something. So there was this level of like personal discipline that they insisted upon, but the grades didn't so much matter. And they weren't like, you need to go be a doctor. So that took away the pressure and that gave me permission to figure it out. So, yeah, worked through high school, and then going into college, this is this is where I got like my big grandiose ideas, because I was like finally free of high school. And again, I like to sit and think and cook stuff up. So I was like, okay, the world is your freaking oyster. Like, you got out of that, podunk town. You're not the dorky kid anymore. You're starting to hit your stride. You're not as homely as you were. Like,
Did you get name brand clothes?
Yeah, well, I kind of have like the opposite. My sister likes name brand clothes, but for me, there was like the streak of rebellion, because even at like 10, 12 years old, when they were giving me a hard time, I was like, if you're not going to like me because I don't have Nikes, then I don't want to be friends with you anyways. So
Oh, there you go.
yeah, so sometimes I feel I hold on to that beyond what's helpful. So like now, I'll like hang on to my fanny pack for 12 years, or I won't upgrade my car because there's this like rebellious of like, you know,
Keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah.
yeah, I don't like that. So even though like my last name is Jones now,
Right.
so I definitely like reject that feeling. But yeah, I graduated high school and I was just really suggestive. I just wanted to be something and to have a career that I was proud of and that I liked. And so it started out like I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. So that's where it all began. And my
Wow.
dad was like, really? It's like,
From
because he didn't,
motorcycles to helicopters.
yeah, I mean, there was nothing about me that was like pilot material. And he was like, well, kid, if you're going to do that, you got to join the military. And I don't know if you're cut out for the
Ooh.
military. He's like, I don't really know if you're a team player.
Ah.
And my 18-year-old self, like, I was like, I know myself. And so I went out and got some flying lessons with like a plane, an airplane, because I
Wow.
couldn't afford helicopter lessons. And a family friend, he was an instructor and he needed more hours. So we finagled like a situation where I would learn to fly planes and he would get hours.
Hmm.
And so I hated it. Yeah, if you ask my husband about this, he loves to tell this story. Like when I was explaining it to him, I was like, yeah, flying a plane is just like a bunch of checklists. And he's
Mhm.
like,
Yes.
So
Okay.
yeah, there was zero creativity involved. So I got off of that, and as quickly as I got away from that idea, I saw The Bone Collector with Angelina Jolie and
Mm.
Denzel Washington.
Mhm.
And I was about 19 at this point, and I was going to college, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what are you going to be? Because you don't want to be something lame. And I saw forensic investigator was like one of the options. And so I was like, that's it. And it was also like this biochemistry degree. So it fed into this internal struggle that I had, that if I could achieve this, then I would prove that I wasn't stupid.
Mhm.
And so I went back and told my dad and mom, I was going to be a forensic investigator. And my dad was just like, kid, like, he's like, you're gonna see the worst things in the world. He's like, you were raised kind of sheltered in the country. Like, you just watched the Cosby Show, which, back then wasn't cringy. Um, and so I rejected his his protests, and I went ahead and got my degree in it, and he was absolutely right. Um, I did not like it.
Amazing how parents kind of can feel out
Oh,
their kids a little bit.
yeah. And so, it's a lot of work in the lab, and then the actual forensics aspect is fascinating,
Mm.
but in practice it's really depressing and it's gross. I would come home and strip down and have to put my clothes in a bag.
Ooh.
You come home and just want to have a drink. And I started looking at the investigators that I was kind of working under, or following, or trying to learn from, and they're all divorced alcoholics and just really negative. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, I don't want to be
Yeah.
again, this is not glamorous, and Denzel is like nowhere around to like keep me going in this. So I got my degree in it, and at that point it was too late to shift gears. And then I was sick of school. Like, again, I wasn't a strong student. I could get myself through my tests, and I had a decent GPA. But I had like saved up $50 every month through my college career to go backpack Europe, because I was like, okay, now you get to be in the real world. Like, you have your degree, your parents told you, because they're like boomers, they thought that if you got a bachelor's, then like every door in the world would be open to
Yeah.
you. And they didn't really understand that everybody has a bachelor's at that point, pretty much.
Yeah.
And we
Did
know
they
nothing.
did they have college degrees?
No, they
No.
didn't.
Okay.
My dad did like a bit of college, and so did my mom. But, this is back in like 60s and 70s, and it wasn't
Mhm.
as accessible. And so, they just pushed us really hard. They're like, we'll be proud of you either way, but if you go to college, like, your life is going to be set.
Yeah.
So I thought I would get out of college making 60, 70,000. And this is back in like '04. So we can all laugh together.
Yes.
And I wanted some jet set lifestyle. I was like, I want to be corporate, because my dad was self-employed and that didn't look flashy to me. I was like, I want to walk in and run a meeting. I want to, have someone fly me somewhere. And I thought, that would be it. And so going back to getting out of college, I was like, well, first I've got to go, backpack Europe and
Yeah.
see some things. And so I took that like I think I had like $1,500 or 2,000, and I went to Europe for 4 months to backpack and to have this like amazing European experience. And like I got an experience. I learned a lot.
Did
But
you do this alone?
yes, yes.
Wow. 4 months in Europe?
Yeah, I cried a lot.
Okay. That's why you probably don't cry today. You cried it all out in 4 months. Were there any pivot points? You mentioned that grades kind of determined your mindset as far as your intelligence. Was there any defining? I mean, were there any people involved that kind of countered that, like your sister? Was there competition? Because I know as business owners, there's circumstances as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I would say a huge pivot probably came in high school. I was about my junior year. I had this teacher, uh, Jeff Kelly, Mr. Kelly. He was, I think he taught American history. And he talked a lot about travel and got me really curious about that, life was bigger than Mustang, Oklahoma. And then he also, too, said, look, he's like, the highest I ever got on my ACT was, I think it was like a 18 or 19. It's like the same thing. And he's like, that is not what's going to make you successful. He's like, so if you're sitting there and you're thinking that you're not going to turn out too much because you don't make great grades, he's like, that's not the real world. He's like, it's about continuing to show up, continuing to cut the mustard, and like the grades aren't going to be the determining factor. He's like, I mean, it's great when you're smart, don't get me wrong, but yeah, he's a very successful person. He was a teacher, but he also had other things. And so that was a big pivot. I remember, I still didn't feel smart in that moment, but it was like he gave me permission, saying like, even if you're not book smart, you can still achieve great
Mhm.
things. And so I feel like I needed that. And then he also got me really curious about, traveling, and he's still a friend to this day, actually. So yeah, I would say that that was a pretty big pivot for me. After college and after I went and rambled around in Europe, I went and got um, a job with my degree as a chemist and did that for a few years. And I think that was pretty pivotal because I realized what I wasn't good at. And although I hadn't discovered what I was good at, I think sometimes it's as powerful as knowing, like, here's the things that you don't like.
Yeah.
And I realized I didn't really, I can work for somebody, and I had plenty. I've had like tons of jobs like through my teens and 20s. But I also realized that there was something in me that wanted to lead it, and that I had ideas, and that I knew that autonomy of control I didn't have. Even if I was a good employee, like you can still get laid off,
Mhm.
if it calls for it within that business. And so I had experienced some layoffs, and all of a sudden that non-flashy life that my dad had didn't seem, quite quite as bad.
Freedom.
So,
He had freedom and you didn't.
right, right. And I didn't see like an upward trajectory. It was like, okay, let's kiss this person's butt, so I can hopefully, get into this role that I'm probably not well suited for anyways, but it's the next level at
Mhm.
this company. And so I started being pretty mindful of that and noticing like I only had 2 weeks of vacation a year. And by the time you use up a few days just randomly throughout the year, I had enough bandwidth for 1 week, to go somewhere, and I was tired. And so I just thought, man, I don't think I want this life.
Mm.
So I started opening my eyes up to trying something different. So at that point, this chapel came for sale in this little art district in Oklahoma, and it was $125,000, and I was 25, and I thought, maybe I can be like a wedding planner.
Mm.
And I hadn't thought of flowers, but I thought, I don't want to be in a lab. I don't want to be a forensic investigator. I don't enjoy the corporate environment that I've been in. And so maybe I can start a side hustle and be self-employed. And so basically, my mom ended up buying the chapel, and my sister and I started a little business called Simply Sisters, and we were wedding planners.
Ah.
And so I would do that on the weekends. So I kept my full-time job, and I would fly in because I finally got that little jet setting job that I thought I wanted.
Yeah. And you weren't flying.
Oh, yeah, no, I was not
piloting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's too many checklists.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just started doing weddings on the weekends and dabbling in what it was like to be self-employed. And I found it intoxicating to have an idea and activate on that idea and then actually have money left over at the end of it. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I did
your
that.
Your own money.
My own money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our first, probably our first 10 weddings, we weren't really sure of really what we were doing. We were figuring it out. We didn't even have a business bank account. So we would just cash the check that our clients would give us, and we would just pay everything cash, and we would just have it all in our purse. And at the end of the wedding, we would just dump out our purse and split out the money. In my first wedding, we made $200 each. And I was like, oh, we are on to something.
We're rich.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite different when it's your own money.
Right. It means something completely different than just the paycheck that you're expecting to hit your account.
Right. So you did some weddings. How long did that last?
So I started this in about 2007, and we became very successful quickly. We averaged about 50 weddings a year or more.
Goodness.
And yeah, I was on the weekends, I was hanging from ladders. And at that time, because it was a small venue, I thought, well, we need to figure out how to offer more services to earn more, because I'm not going to be able to support myself, by just being a wedding planner, especially in a partnership. And I was single and unmarried and, own my own home. So I had to replace that income of my corporate job. And so I noticed some of my clients didn't have a florist, and I thought, well, maybe I can do flowers. It's just the kind of that whole that blind confidence of maybe I can be a helicopter pilot.
I love the mindset though.
Yeah, I just kind of I think the thing is when your parents don't give you a lot of pressure, and it's okay to fail. I think that you have that permission to fail, and nobody likes to fail, but it doesn't scare me. So I've never had that fear, which has been helpful. But basically I thought, well, maybe I can kind of be a florist and help these girls with their flowers. And so I started ordering flowers in bulk off Sam's Club. And my first wedding, I ordered 200 red roses because it was 2007, and that's what she wanted. And it was before Pinterest. And I just thought roses were going to be coming out of every nook and cranny of that place. I thought 200 roses was the biggest deal that has ever been done.
It sounds a lot.
Sounds like a lot, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't get them in advance, so they hadn't blown open and gotten all big. They were just tight bullets. And yeah, I worked so hard at that wedding. It was so it was so underwhelming. That was I think the same one I made $200 off of.
The look on your face is just kind of says it all.
So bad.
You had a vision, and then you're looking at these little bitty things.
Oh, it was. And I was such a stress ball. Even now, if I'm working flowers and my mom and sister come to talk to me, they'll always, even now, say, I'm sorry you're working on flowers. I'm like, no, it's okay. You can talk to me now. Because when I was new, they would try to talk to me. I was like, stop talking. I cannot talk right now. I'm building the centerpiece. It's not going well. I'm fighting these flowers. So yeah, that was a big pivot, and that was just let's try it out and then let's improve. But I found that I loved working with my hands. It kind of took me back to maybe the things I enjoyed in childhood, which is, nature, being outside, having my hands in something tangible instead of just typing away. And I thought, I think I'm onto something. I think I kind of love this. And yeah, that's where the whole floral journey began.
Okay, so this floral journey turned into a seven-figure plus business, which most small businesses, in fact, less than 10% ever hit the $1 million mark. So congratulations on that. That's very rare. So what is the name of the business? What does it do? And then we'll talk a little more about some of your pivots along the way, how you went from a startup to a seven-figure plus business.
Yeah, so my business is called Flower Moxie. It's an online e-commerce business, and I sell flowers to DIY brides and teach them how to put it together. So I was a florist and wedding planner, and around 2013, I was getting a bit bored of that, and I realized that I was capped out on how much I could really earn because I couldn't earn money unless I worked a wedding on the weekend. And so the thought was, well, how can I how can I make passive income? And so we can all laugh together at that.
Yeah.
Because my $1 million idea was something that I thought would be like passive income, because that's I feel like that started to become a buzzword in
Yeah.
2013, 14. I was like, oh man, if I fired up a website and helped people who couldn't afford to hire a florist, I can make money in my sleep.
Hmm.
And yeah, you do, an order will roll in your sleep, but the second you wake up, you have to address that order.
I was
So,
going to say, so you never slept.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I started as a side hustle, and because I had my full-time wedding planning and floral business. And so I started making like mouth breathing tutorials in my living room with my like roommate and her boyfriend watching me. And it was really awkward. I'm an
So
introvert.
were you still working with your sister then at this
Yeah.
point? Okay.
Yeah. So I started Flower Moxie went live in 2014, and I actually finally stopped my wedding career in 2020. And
Oh,
so I was really doing both for a long time, and I think it was a little bit of fear of letting go of what I knew, and then fear of really leaning into Flower Moxie because it was hard, and I was already frustrated with it, and I had a love-hate relation. I had more of a hate relationship with it than a love. And I was like, what have I done? Like I've made myself a prison. So that was early days.
hmm.
So
So what are some of the lessons along the way? You went from startup to a big national company. Actually, you sell around the world, don't you?
no, well, so
Yeah.
I can get some of my flowers down into the Caribbean, but mainly just the US.
US. Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously there were some bullet points along the way that helped you get past that bottleneck or that bandwidth that most small business owners run out of. What would you say you'd contribute to some of those defining moments that got you to this level, then that level, some of the pivots that you've made?
That's a great question. I would say it's kind of twofold. Like you have what's happening inside your business, and then you have what's happening outside of your business. And I think they go very much hand in hand. So one thing that I think allowed me to get through that bottleneck was I never got myself over a barrel financially, which
Mm,
I don't feel like you hear a lot of folks talk about. They always say like go big or go home.
yeah.
And, like it's got to, be the best or it doesn't count. And that wasn't my mindset. I've always been conservative financially, and I think that is a huge reason of why my business has survived.
Hmm.
And so it started out small. I put like $5,000 into it, and I just had to, grow it slowly. But in my personal life and externally, I, had a home that wasn't, I had a low mortgage. Kept the same car for 14 years. I didn't allow myself to go into debt. And then I kept the wedding planning going for quite a while until I was like, I've got to quit.
Yeah.
But those things I think were really important, because I believe that when you're stressed and you're financially in a bad spot, then you're going to have to make decisions out of that, because that's a real glaring need. And so I think that was allowed me the ability to continue. And as far as happening in my business, what got me through those bottlenecks?
Well, how did you keep yourself accountable financially? So most small business owners have sleepless nights, and they also hear going back to go big or go home. They also hear you got to spend money to make money. I mean, what kept you focused, and how did you know how much money to have on hand so you didn't have to worry about that part of the business?
Well, I think that's something I still struggle with. And you and I have talked before about this. I wouldn't, because I kept my other career, I wouldn't pay myself through Flower and Moxie, which, I think Profit First and other books would say that was a bad idea. But basically, I just saved that money. So I worked out of my home. I had, 2 employees eventually come to my home. And I would say something psychologically changed in me when I actually had my first full-time employee. There, all of a sudden, there was this different level of responsibility that, I can, my non-performance will impact somebody's livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that, they couldn't find another job. It's not, that my company was the end all be all, but it did give a seriousness of like, okay, you're not just mucking around with this anymore. Like, you have to take it seriously.
Yeah.
Because those people are depending on you. And so I think that sometimes I go in the wrong direction, as far as I will hold on to way too much cash. And then there's that delayed gratification. So, I've learned that when I buy myself something, or if I splurge, like that's all well and good, but that's a really quick dopamine hit, and then it's over.
Yeah.
And so I think I would hold myself back in those ways, and then just try to make really conservative decisions. And I think some of it's like just being comfortable with maybe being, I don't know the right word, maybe a little embarrassed, or having something that doesn't feed your ego.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I had employees come to my home, and then when I was getting married, and I was like, okay, I can't have employees come to my house anymore. And plus it sucks. Like, I'm not going to lie. But then, the thought is, well, let's rent a nice facility, let's get a commercial property and let's look legit. And I did all the numbers, and I was like, man, I'll lose a lot with that and all this money I've saved. So I ended up finding this house that was as is. And, I remodeled it, and we moved, I moved my business into there.
Mm.
And so I started hiring more people, and they, it was embarrassing when they would come for an interview, because they would come to a literal house,
A
and I'd
house.
have to tell them, I'm like, hey, this is how I do it. Like, no one lives here. We just work out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think you have to kind of die to your ego in order to succeed. And I think I would have been horrible at that in my 20s, but I think by the time I hit like my mid 30s, I was more comfortable with, yeah.
So growing up wearing the non-branding clothes probably helped. I was similar to that. So to me, I'm not about the flash. I mean, if my car gets me from here to there and doesn't break down every day throughout the year, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, you're winning.
I don't need the flash.
It's true.
So you're working out of your home, and were there some defining moments there that kind of kept you creeping along that really, I know it's being, when you hire your first employee, it's the scariest feeling in the world. That was 20 plus years ago for me. And I remember exactly, like, can I afford them? what if I bring them on board and then I can't, and then they can't put food on their table for their family, all those things. Is that kind of like the first stepping stone was when you hired your employee? Because I know for a lot of solopreneurs, they're scared to death, and a lot of times they wait too long to where they're just so wrapped in the business. Now we can't find somebody to help because we're so busy. We don't have time to train anybody.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. And I would definitely say I fell under that category because I experienced like literal pain when I would cut my first employee a check. Like, I was like, are you kidding me? Like it just felt terrible. And then I learned to like get Gusto and set up auto pay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was a large part of it.
So how did you manage the employees, having never had employees? What were some of those struggles, or maybe some tips that you could offer to someone else that's kind of in that same situation right now?
So that was a bit of a learning curve. I feel like I've gotten really lucky to where I haven't had a lot of stinkers. But going back to the previous question, continuing my self-education in business has helped. So I would listen to podcasts like How I Built This, and I would listen to people who had really succeed talk about where they started. And like you said at the beginning of the podcast, there's a lot of the same identifying moments where they weren't a strong student. They did struggle with their business. They almost filed bankruptcy. And so I think that really helped spur me along. And then reading things like E-Myth or The Pumpkin Plan, I was always trying to do that because I always felt like I didn't know what I was doing because I had a degree in something different. But I approached the same thing when it came to employees. My first employee, she was a good friend of mine. And so it wasn't like I was in this boss mode. And then I just started reflecting about how I wanted to be treated when I was an employee. Like, I don't like to be micromanaged. Nobody likes that.
Right.
And I learned that if I have to micromanage you, then you're just not going to be a fit, for the culture and with my management style. And so I found like having weekly meetings, letting them give input and like really listening and really just trying to treat it like a real team.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I don't call my employees, I like to call them team members. And even just kind of small things like if I'm with one of my team members and I'm introducing them, I don't say like, this is Callie, she works for me. I say, this is Callie, we work together. And so I would try to like set them in positions to succeed and then pay attention to what they were naturally good at and try to carve out a position to where they would thrive in that area. And so that's been a huge, I think, key in my success as far as my team is concerned. But they also know at the end of the day, like when you're a small business, sometimes you've got to wear a lot of hats. And I never like to hear, it's not my job, because I still clean the toilets at, my space, and there's nothing that I won't do, or I would have an employee do that I wouldn't do. So I think they've seen that. And so I would say that that's been I think, helpful in the success of working with my team.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard.
Yeah. That's a ongoing learning curve, especially with the generations that change. And we hear a lot about different generations and the challenges. I mean, we have our own challenges in our generation. I just think being adaptable to the generations and really the generations, in my opinion, make us better. Like, I think the generations that keep coming up, people are kind of trash talking them, but I think they're making us better myself. That's just my opinion. But you've also, some of your success is contributed to marketing, because you do all your sales revenue comes from digital marketing, right? I mean, you're on the web, the internet, the different platforms, social media. And I know one of the biggest struggles with most small businesses is finding a good, reputable marketing source for whatever that is. So what are some of your tips that you would give? Because you've obviously been very successful in finding the right resources.
So I think some of it has to do with, let's see. That's a really good question. I don't think marketing is something that you can just hand over. I think that you really have to understand your business and the voice that you want, and understand the demographic that you're trying to hit and how you want to speak to your customers. And so I had enough experience where I handed a task off to an agency, whether it was SEO or a developer or a branding specialist, and I spent a lot of money and I was sorely disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned is that it's not that you can't hire an agency or a contractor, because I still do, and I have to, and I have good ones that I work with. What I learned was that you have to know enough to be dangerous. You have to understand the subject, because I feel that when it comes to marketing or advertising, like, they can send you this scope of work and it's just filled with a lot of fluff, but the tangible things just really aren't there. And, you get locked into a 6-month contract of $3,000 a month. And at the end of it, you're like, oh man, I feel like I wasted that.
Yeah.
And so for one, I didn't have, a ton of money, and I was like, kind of clutchy with it and cheap. And, I just wasn't willing to just throw money as quickly at the problem. And so I thought, well, I need to figure this out. And so that was a difficult thing. And I had a younger employee, and that, like, going back to what you said, she was really helpful in that. I was wanting to avoid it. Like, there was moments where I thought, I don't even want, like, I wonder if I could, like, have this business and just screw social media, just not even mess with it.
Yeah.
And I knew that, it's like, I knew internally that was a misstep, but I want to make it clear that I entertained that multiple times, because I'm an introvert. I don't want my face, on YouTube or Instagram, but I realized really quickly, like, I can't have this without doing that.
Right. Yeah.
And I just had to get over myself and start doing reels and being bad at it and looking dumb. And, the younger team member that I had, Michaela, she was extremely helpful in that. And she would kind of sit and coach me through those moments of, she's like, say it faster, get it out.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just kind of have to find your groove with that. And you have to know that you're going to start out, doing a poor job, but then if you continue to do it, you'll improve, or at least you should improve. And then I've purchased courses of people who I think have really good advice, and I try to get better at it. And so I think the main thing is I have to just shut off the part of my mind that gets really uncomfortable with doing reels and marketing and social media and tutorials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say most of the podcast guests that we've had, a couple of tips, because we're here to help other small business owners. And one of the tips that almost every guest has mentioned is, do not sign a contract. Do not get stuck in a contract. And I know there's a lot of agencies and people out there that they require it because they want a commitment from you. I'm here to tell you, one of my businesses was in marketing. Do not sign a contract, because the deliverables will not come.
And so true.
Yeah. So that's one step. The second one is, I love what you mentioned about just be yourself. Some of the agencies will try to get you to tweak this or tweak that and modify this keyword, and you'll get more searches with this. But then what if that relationship ends? Now you've got another agency coming in. And I learned that many years ago when we had a marketing, we'd hire a marketing director, and every single one of them, the first thing they wanted to do was change our brand, either the slogan, tagline, the color. And I'm like, why? And it took me a while, but after that, I'm like, if that's the first thing you're going to do, you're not welcome here. Like, that's our brand. That's my brand, not your brand.
Right.
And so that's very powerful what you said, because, and then the third thing that I heard you say was just do it. Just do it the first time, and then it will be easier the second time and the third time. I think you and I are both more extrovert than we think we are, but we kind of have that introvert feeling because we don't like seeing ourselves. But you got to show yourself. You got to be the face of the business, or you're just not gonna succeed. For most businesses, not all businesses.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, some, if it's, I can't even think of what it would be where a face of the business wouldn't really be appropriate or matter. Like, great,
Yeah.
congratulations. But
Right.
any brand that has a brand, a point of view, like you don't want it to be a faceless brand, and people really connect with people,
Yes.
even on social media. So I had to start putting myself and my weirdness out there, and it's uncomfortable, but I learned how to do it in ways that supported my insecurities.
Yeah. So people like to buy from those they know, like, and trust, and they can't do that if they don't know who's behind the brand. So that's very powerful. So it's amazing that our time is almost up. And
Oh my
so to
gosh.
give, I know, right? So to give just a voice of hope to other small business owners, I like to help them think big, because most of us can't even think about how I'm going to make it through this week. I've mentioned to small business owners, let's set some 10-year goals. And they're like, can we just set end of day goals? Because that's all I can think. That's all I can think of. So what are some big, audacious goals that you have going on so that people can see, like, wow, that's thinking big time?
Yeah. Well, I've got my hands in a few pots right now, so I'm rolling out a new company hopefully this year, and firing up another website that's kind of it will be part of Flower Moxie, but Flower Moxie, focuses towards brides, and this will be outside of weddings. And so, yeah, I want to be the strongest and the best floral company that you can find online when it comes to reputation, quality. Um,
I know you're always moving the target, so
yeah,
it's amazing to
it's not a
watch you.
dollar. It's not a dollar amount for
Right.
me. It's just more. It's kind of like a vision of really having something that I'm proud of, and uh, still maintaining the integrity with that. So it would involve scaling, but still retaining the joy in it, and still having that life balance. Like, can I make it bigger? Can I roll out these other ideas and still be somebody that I want to be around? And still have a life that I want to live, and still be able to, take those trips and those adventures that are a core part of me, and go to pottery. I know that we've talked about that, but that's something I enjoy. So that would be my audacious goal, is to roll out these two other concepts while still, being in this upswing mode. Now I know that, happiness is kind of, fluctuates, and
Right.
life changes. Um, but yeah, going into these new concepts, it's exciting, but I don't want to go back to the place that I was, like when you and I first met, where
Yeah.
I was really stressed. And so I think that that's an honorable goal, but that's what I'm thinking of. I feel like I can continue to grow it and still be able to do it in a way that, maintains integrity in my life.
Well, you're doing
It's
an
not as
excellent.
flashy. It's not like a flashy answer. I
Well,
should have said private jet, but no one likes a liar.
well, like I tell small business owners, it's great to have goals, but you got to be realistic too. And you got to find that happy spot.
Yeah.
When I interview business owners and ask, do they feel successful? The ones that don't are missing one of two things, and that's either the happiness or they're missing the security. So they're either something's off balance, something's not aligned with their core values of how they need to be or feel. And so that's a very powerful point that it's not always about the money. It's more about the happiness. And so when we're striving as a small business owner, I want small business owners out there to think about what makes you happy. Because if you're not happy, you're going to get burnt out, and it leads to depression and so many other alcohol and, like your forensic guys, girls. You got to be happy.
I think that's one of the things that I remember from our first meeting, and is that you really take it down to the foundation of like, let's go back to the core. And you took me through this process of asking all of these questions and figuring that out, because at the end of the day, the number is not going to count. I'm glad that we were able to hit 7 figures and we keep climbing, but at the end of the day, that very much means very little to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're such a good coach and reminder of like, let's go back to those core values in life and in your business, because every time I bring a problem to you, you're like, all right, let's go back to the core value of what you decided for Flower Moxie, and let's make the decision out of that. And so that's such an important step that I don't know of any small business owners who start out doing that. You just kind of start out with your idea and you're like, all right, let's get this going.
Yeah.
And then you realize really quick you're in hot water, you're unhappy, you're drinking too much, and like your outlet is to overeat or overindulge in some area of life. But yeah, anybody listening to this podcast, keep listening to this man, because I have to say, like, I give you so much credit for my upswing. And I remember when I first met you, like, I guess it was over a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
I was just like, how can I just build this up a little more to sell it and get out? And now you're like, do you still think about selling your business? I'm like, no, it's great. I love this.
Everything's great.
So yeah,
and it really is.
But
there's that balance of knowing what you want, having clarity, and then a plan. And that really changes the whole perspective of owning a business, is when you know those two things, as well as a lot of other things. But then the biggest thing that I attribute to you is you actually took action. And that's what a lot of small business owners don't do, is when they're given the tools, resources, or knowledge, experience, whatever it is, to do certain things, sometimes it's easier to stay stuck in the status quo.
Yeah.
And then they, continue getting more vices or, habits, and
absolutely
ignoring the business instead of fixing the business. So you have Flower Moxie. How do people get a hold of you if they want to do it themselves, flower weddings?
Yeah, so you can visit flowermoxie.com or hop on our Instagram, which is Flower Moxie. If you want to just see some tutorials, our YouTube channel is Flower Moxie as well. And so I do like quick reels on social media, more in-depth tutorials on YouTube. And so, yeah, start there. Get some grocery store flowers, have a practice, or go outside and snip some things. But I think it's been, surprising at how much people enjoy that, getting their hands in nature and being able to create something. So at the end of the day, even people who don't think that they're artistic, they find that, yeah,
there's some creativity in there somewhere.
Yep, there's some life improvement, even when you're just playing with some flowers.
Yeah. Well, you have been a complete joy, and I am so proud of you. I mean, you are taking this thing to levels, and I can't wait to see how far you go, because especially with your other businesses. Is there a name yet for that we can share? Or are we still dabbling?
Yeah, so I've gone through a few names, but I think we've settled on Petal Icon.
Petal Icon. I like it. And is that the website too?
That will be the website. So we'll basically be, we're selling preserved arrangements, preserved flowers, and kind of the naming is because icons don't die, nor do these flowers, even though they're real.
Yeah, I love it. So is there any last words of advice for small business owners?
Yeah, I would say if you're struggling, then you need to get help. You need to hire a coach. There is no shame in hiring a business coach, no shame in a life coach, but I would say hire a business coach. If you're struggling and you're not feeling hardly any upswings and you feel like you want to just quit it all before you do that, you need to get help, because you don't want to cut down a tree in the middle of winter. You don't want to make a big decision of selling your business or closing the doors when you're still in the thick of things. So I would say bring in somebody else, someone who's going to help you navigate those challenges, and then make that decision. If you're ready to let it go, then let it go. But don't make that decision until you've gotten help and you've actually listened to that help and implemented it.
Excellent advice. Solid. So thank you again, and we will see you around soon.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Small Business Pivots. A lot of small business owners are feeling stuck, bogged down, barely making ends meet. But it's Michael's passion to help you change all of it. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten some useful advice from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on YouTube at Business Ownership Simplified. See you next time on Small Business Pivots.